Okie dokie. Kia ora whānau. Finally managed to get the new camera set up with a tripod. As you can see, slightly better than potato vision. I thought I'd do a little talk about the actual practical sides of running a kitchen, things that are the reasons why a lot of people, a lot of theoretically smart business people will fail when they start a restaurant. And it has a lot to do with, one, the habits of people, and two, kind of more dangerously, the practical nature. That's just Maui ripping up a scratching post. Has to do with people's behaviours and the fact that fundamentally, even in a place like America, hospitality is a luxury. It is not a necessary spend. So you actually need to seduce people to come into it, which can and cannot be a problem. It can be quite problematic for people that don't understand the industry and don't want to understand the industry. There are tons of people out there that can cook good meals. In fact, I'm willing to bet there's someone out there that can cook a better meal than Rene Redzepi, Gordon Ramsay, Marco Pierre White, you name your favourite celebrity chef. I'm not saying I'm a celebrity chef or that I'm famous. I'm just saying there are people out there that, for four people, given unlimited time and a dictated menu in that they're telling these four people exactly what we can have, they could probably turn out better food than me. And any professional chef out there. The difference is, and this is the thing that fundamentally fucks up a lot of people, is being a chef isn't about that one perfect meal. It's about making 500 perfect meals. It's about making them 7 days a week, 3 services a day, for decades. And I get that sounds kind of counterintuitive to people. They sit there and go, well, chefs get bored, chefs change things, etc. But they don't, though. Chefs fundamentally are circling around a very narrow repertoire of cuisine that they are comfortable doing, that they know they do well, and that will sell. Which flows on to another part. When you're dictating to 4 people what they're going to eat, that's what they're having. Sure, you'll take in dietary considerations and stuff like that, but being a chef and running a restaurant is about opening your doors and letting between 0 and 1,000 people walk in every day and cooking whatever they say they want off a menu. Now, you do control the menu, but your menu really needs to have around 12 items on it. And that's a simple 4 starters, 4 mains, 4 dessert option. That's kind of like your entry level. You need to have 12. And they all need to be the same quality. Now, they don't have to be perfect. You don't have to cook everything better than Marco Pierre White, but they all need to be coming out at the same quality. And you need to turn them out fast. You will have approximately half an hour to go from ordering 2 desserts, mains really, but the gold standard that I was taught at TAFE as an apprentice and that I aim for as a head chef is 5-12-12 rule, which is once that order is received, they get their starters within 5 minutes of that order being placed, and that's them giving it to the waiter or to the front of house staff. That's not you receiving it in the kitchen. So you need to have all your mains capable of being fired off in 5 minutes. Like literally from when the person goes, I want garlic bread, it needs to be in front of them 5 minutes later. And then after that, you have 12 minutes to get their mains to them. Now, I know what you're thinking, people want to linger, they want to go slow. That's cool, we can change that. But we're talking about the gold standard. What are you aiming for? What do you have to provide? It's 12 minutes after they get their starter, 17 minutes after the beginning of the meal, after they've just whispered their heart's desire to the wait staff. 17 minutes later, they have to have their main in front of them. And that is including, for most parts, if they do something stupid like order of a 15 kilo very well done steak, you better figure out a way, chef, to get that thing up there in 17 goddamn minutes, or don't you call yourself a chef? And then you need to have desserts, a ethereal castle made out of spun sugar. That needs to be up there 12 minutes after. their mains go out. And yes, that is insane and that is punchy, but that's also what you have to aim for. That's the gold standard. That's what it is to be a chef. You need to be able to write a menu and cook fast enough that that is your, I don't want to say average, but you're within the ballpark. Like 45 minutes is kind of okay for a total meal from um, apps to mains to desserts. 45 minutes is good because the thing is, you need your table back. You need to get people through the door and you need them to spend money, which is why you need to have a starter, a main, and a dessert. And they need to be relatively cheap, or you need to know how to make them cheap. Um, and this is feeding into what I wanted to talk about, which is food costs and loss leaders. Now, the classic example that you taught in economics for a loss leader is milk. Supermarket loses money on milk because they drag you in for other stuff. That's all well and good, but there's only a finite amount of milk that any one given person can consume and will consume. So your loss leader example in this doesn't translate to hospitality because one, we've already established, we are not selling a necessity. We're selling a luxury. It's not like milk, it's not like bread. Can't afford to take the loss on that. And the other thing is, if your loss leader is going to be a main, because that's just how it works, because everyone that comes into a restaurant will buy a main, you kind of want to have front of house stuff to upsell desserts and starters, but fundamentally you're expecting to sell mains. So if you're going to have a loss leader to lure people in, it's going to be in your mains. Now this is where the experience and the training comes in, and this is what separates the qualified from the unqualified, the professionals from the shit kicker. You want your loss leader to be your most expensive item. You want to take a hit, not much of a hit admittedly, but you want to take a hit on your most expensive item. If you're going to have a tomahawk on a menu, you're going to take a hit on that. You're going to put that on the menu for maybe $80, $90, $100, and you're going to aim it so that you lose money on that steak. Because how many people are honestly going to order a tomahawk? Not many. So you can hide those losses. Usually by having either no sides or cheaper sides on it, using things like the great term seasonal veg, garden salad, like you use these catch-all terms so that whatever's cheapest that week can get thrown on the plate to try and pull back your losses. But if you make your loss leader something like a burger that you're selling at less than the price of production, for example, what will happen is people will come and order the burger because it's cheap. It's ridiculously cheap. For example, a good example is place where I am at the moment. Previous management, previous chef, okayed a $12 burger with fries. Cheapest burger in Brisbane. Literally the cheapest burger in Brisbane. The only way to get one cheaper is to go to somewhere like Macca's. And you're only going to save $4 if you go to Macca's. It is less than the price of production. It loses money. The problem is people who who know what a loss leader is in economics misplace that to hospitality. And the problem is not everyone's going to come in and order a tomahawk, right? Let's say I charge you $80 for a tomahawk, and it costs me, let's say $40 for the tomahawk. I'm going to lose money because I need to sell that for $155 to make money. But if I'm prepared to take a loss and sell it at $90, for example, I'm still losing money. It still hurts. But how many people are going to walk in and order a whole tomahawk? Not many. So I can keep my losses contain the damage that loss leader does. More importantly, it's a prestige item. Some people will come in just for the cheapest tomahawk in the city. But that's okay because the people that come with them are not necessarily going to eat the tomahawk. Now, if you can sell enough tomahawks, you can also come up with a deal with your supplier because tomahawks are a prestige thing. You might actually be able to keep it. So you're not making money, but you're not losing money on your tomahawk. That's kind of your best hope. But with something with a burger, everyone will order a burger. You know, $12 with fries. Go, you can't beat that, kids. And the problem is that people who are full, who want a meal, generally will order the cheapest thing on the menu if it is like that. And so the loss leader just cuts out the viability of the business from underneath it. And that's one of the reasons why so many restaurants fail. They don't understand the breakdown of cost, and they don't understand the psychology of selling food to people. Once again, going to a restaurant is a luxury item, even in America, even in Tokyo, even in places that have coffin motels. Going to a restaurant is fundamentally a luxury. Um, it's not much of a luxury, I will admit. In some parts of America, at some times, I'm not sure if it's still the case, it was actually cheaper to buy food from a fast food restaurant than it was to buy the ingredients and make it yourself. They're operating on, well, the corporations that run that are operating on scale that a normal restaurant effectively can't match. If you're a trained chef, you are not working for McDonald's. They are an industrial conglomerate that produces food at below the cost of production, and the corporation can afford to do that because it kicks the burden onto the franchisees. That's right, the people that own those McDonald's stores all over the place. They're the ones that eat the loss. They're the ones that lose their life savings. They're the ones that will work 90-hour weeks trying to keep a McDonald's in a bad place open. That's how that works. And it's the same with all franchise operated businesses. The corporation itself makes money by gouging out everybody down chain. That's just how that works. They're not real restaurants, it's industrialized food. They're basically slaving in the burger lines. And they are still part of the, depending on which stats you look at. When I was in TAFE, we were taught that 90% of restaurants failed. I've seen stats ranging from anything, depending on which country it is, from 60 to 95% of all restaurants fail in the first year or have to be rebranded in a way that is significant to the point at which basically shutting the doors and starting again if you've got deep enough pockets. Restaurants do not. Basically, the easiest way to make 100 grand in a restaurant is to start with $1 million and shut your doors after a year. That's just how it works. And one of the things that boils down to is everyone kind of knows how much food costs. Everyone is aware of the cost of food, even though it's currently insane at the moment. So all you can really do is, once again, apply another gold standard. Now, I know some people are going to hate the fact that I keep pulling out these gold standards and using them as examples when, the reality is vastly different. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the things that are a little bit different. Fundamentally, your costing of food, your food cost, the cost of the materials coming into the restaurant should be 33 1/3%. 1/3 of the cost of a plate should be the ingredients. Your labour is another third. And then out of that final third, you need to have your capital costs, utilities, rent, equipment, maintenance, everything, advertising. Everything is 23%. You need to keep it down to 23%. And that final 10.1 repeater percent, that's the gross profit of the restaurant. That's, once again, the gold standard, what you should be getting out of it. So in theory, when you look at a plate that costs $30, the profit on that is $10. You're not making bank, not easily. Now, there are certain things that you can do and sell that do make you money. Fries are a great example. For example, a box of fries at the moment costs somewhere in the realms of $40, $45 for a 12 kilo box. If I sell a serve of fries for the average in Brisbane sitting about $10.50 at the moment, I can give you a kilo of fries, more fries than you could ever eat, comfortably in a sitting, and still make money. I don't though. Average serve of fries in Brisbane at the moment is hovering between 150 200 grams cooked. That's still a big bowl. That is a bowl. That is literally a bowl this big. It is a very large and significant amount of fries to be eating. But it is dirt cheap to throw on them, and everyone kind of gets that. And even when you start adding to the food costs, the cost of the oil, the cost of gas, which you shouldn't really do because they should be capital expenses, the fries are where you make money. That's why a lot of places that sell expensive steaks will have a default option of some sort of potatoy starch, because even instant mashed potato is dirt cheap. It's basically the same. You can throw it on the plate for less than $1. They're talking a significant amount of fries on a plate for less than $1. And a garden salad. It's a bad example in Australia at the moment because the main winter harvest area in Australia has been hit by winter rains and basically been destroyed. So garden sale is up through the roof, but this is why your standard signs, America, Canada, New Zealand, I think I said Australia, but just in case I didn't, Australia again, we'll make it 3 times. Salad and chips because they're cheap and they allow you, and you can give significant amounts of them. If I sell you a 250 gram steak, at the moment that 250 gram steak is going to cost me around $5 to put on a plate. So if I want to sell that to you for around $30, which I kind of want to, I need to make sure everything else that goes on that plate it costs me less than $5. Once again, using the 33 1/3 rule, I've got to do the whole plate for $10, which doesn't really work because the average price for 250 steak in Brisbane at the moment is $29. So anyway, just going to use simple numbers because otherwise I'm going to sit here and rave on like a lunatic. And as a head chef, you kind of have to start looking at menus. You have to look at enough menus so that you can have things at your command, like the average price of what you're selling, so you can tell if you're doing well or not. Because you don't want to. You're either going to market yourself as the cheapest place in a city, or you want to keep up with the rest of the pack. You don't necessarily want to be the cheapest place, because if you're running cheap trying to get people through the door, well, if you're losing money or not making much money every time you sell something, it will hurt your business. And also, you're teaching your customers that your food is cheap. People associate cheap food with being not very good. So once again, there we go. It ends up being a drain circle. You drop your prices trying to drag more people in, and people sit there and go, "Holy shit, their food's cheap. How good could it possibly be?" So nobody comes. And then you've got nowhere to go, because as soon as you've got that branding, you're doomed, because people make their mind up about restaurants long before they set foot in them. It takes a lot of work to write a restaurant that is tinkering, and you've got to have some pretty deep pockets to spend months staring down significant losses so that you can make that necessary turn. If you are going to make that turn, most of the time it's just easier to just cut your losses and walk away. Why throw good money after bad when there is a good chance that you will not be able to salvage the business? Because that's just how it works, man. It's the zeitgeist. You can't necessarily save a failing restaurant. Now, flowing back onto that, so you've got your 10%. You're sitting there going, "Okay, cool, sweet." But the problem is, you need to be consistent about stuff. This is the other thing. People remember food. They remember how it tastes. It is a very solid indicator. People have strong memories tied to food. So, once again, this is why an amateur walks in, someone that is a successful accountant or a successful welder or whatever, and they start a restaurant and it fucking explodes in their face. And they can't figure out why, because hey, just go look at freaking any one of Gordon Ramsay's kitchen nightmares. Just pick one and watch it, and you'll see people that have either given up cooking good food, in which case they've tanked the reputation of the restaurant, or people that don't understand what they're trying to do. Like, you're literally trying to seduce people. I've said it before, I'll say it again. A chef's job is not to sell someone food. That's what a supermarket does. It's goddamn. That is what a lifestyle program does. It sells you food. It sits there and says you want to have the Icelandic lamb, you want to have the Napa Valley wine, you want to have biodynamic corn grown in the highlands of Chile and then brought down by a peasant worker. You want to have quinoa, and you want to have jackfruit on the plate, and you want it all done with these heirloom citruses. That's what fucking lifestyles programs sell you. Lifestyle media and influencers will sell you shit. Case in point, look at Salt Bay. His food is fucking rubbish and it's covered in gold, but people go there and he makes a significant amount of money operating in 3 fucking countries because people are sold the fantasy, and that's what you're selling. And for the record, that little salty thing that he does, he could only do that in Turkey, where that is not actually against the rules. He is not allowed to do that in America, Canada, and England, where he also operates. He also has to wear gloves. So you will not get your little Instagram TikTok moment when you go to a Salt Bay restaurant. He will not be there. In fact, a celebrity chef on any given night is not going to even be in the same country as whatever restaurant you've walked into. Unless you remember their family, in which case you're probably with them in whichever weird country they've wandered off to. That's just how it is. You cannot expect to go to a celebrity chef's restaurant when that celebrity chef owns 3 or 4 restaurants in 2, 3, 4, 5 countries and expect to see them. They are not there. In fact, it's kind of hilarious. One of the things that most people don't know, if you were there within the last 25% of a dinner service, the head chef isn't even there, yet alone the executive chef, yet alone the celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay, who you desperately are hoping to see. They're not there. They've gone home. They have so much more work to do that doesn't involve cooking. And they need to do that someplace that isn't a freaking kitchen. Because you can't have laptops and computers and all sorts of sexy stuff like that in kitchens because they get broken, wet, and explode and catch fire and kill everybody. And that's a bad thing, apparently, according to OHS. Now, where does that leave you? Where does that leave us with our discussion of restaurants? Okay. So, when you look at what you're selling at a restaurant, you're not selling food. You are selling a fantasy. You are selling the first date. You are selling the anniversary, the wedding, the birthday, all of it. You are selling people their milestones. And I know of people that have been going to restaurants for 60 years because their first date was at a restaurant. In fact, when I was an apprentice at Gambaris in 2012, one of the things we did was there was a couple that literally had been going to the Gambaris restaurant since the 1950s. I think they'd started going in 1953 or something, like the second year the restaurants were open. They actually loved a menu from the mid-1960s. When they booked, we would get photocopies of that menu, and that's what they had, and we would prepare it for them. Because that's what we were selling. For 60 years, they had come to the same restaurant. That's a regular, for the record. That is a regular customer, someone that has been coming to a restaurant once a month for 60 years. You're not a regular if you come into a restaurant on, cheap steak night every second week or whatever. Like, you want to be considered a regular by the chef, you're going to have to put some hard yards in there. And these people had. And so, for them, we would recreate a menu that was 50 years old. Like, it was literally handwritten notes and handwriting from 10 chefs ago. But we recreated it for them because that's what we were selling them. We were selling them a date night from when they were probably first married or just before they got married. Whatever the early 1960s meant for this couple, whatever made it their magic time that they wanted to go back to, that's what we sold them, and they paid for it. There's another example. When I was working in Seattle, we had extremely rich people come in and order very well done steak, boiled carrots, boiled potatoes with no seasoning on any of it. Do you know why? Because that's how their parents cooked in the 1970s. People would come into a restaurant and spend thousands of dollars, and I mean multiple thousands of dollars. One example I can think of that I'm not going to name because I'm not stupid, he would spend around $10,000 once a month to have the meal I've just described. No seasoning on any of it. He would also, he'd book out the private dining room. That's $2,000 right there. Bam. You want to have the private dining room at this restaurant? $2,000. Money on the table. Minimum food spend was $1,000. So now he spent $3,000. Bam. And he would come in and he would order off the menu, the museum wine list. That's the expensive shit. That's the stuff where there's maybe a pallet of that wine left in the entire goddamn world, where there is literally 20 of those bottles left in the United States. And he would spend, his average spend was just over $10,000 US a month to eat unseasoned, very well done steak. From memory, it was a nice cut as well. I think it was ribeye. But anyway, it didn't matter because it was cooked to death. Carrots boiled in plain water, and potatoes boiled in plain water. Ideally the same pot, but that was a preferred, not a demand. The unseasoned was the demand, no sauce either. And this is not one of those, and then he snuck out a bottle of ketchup. He didn't. He literally would just eat this meal that no doubt he ate 10,000 times when he was growing up in the early 70s, because that's how people cooked in the early 70s. That's how a lot of people cook now. And he paid 10 grand a month for that. And that was allowing him to go back to a time and place on his own. This is the other thing. You've got a lot of money. Maybe you want to throw it around. Maybe you don't. Maybe there's some private things that you want to do. Maybe for this guy, it was his version of going to a dominatrix freaking once a month. Maybe he did that as well. I don't know. I don't care. But that's what a restaurant sells people. For example, at the moment, one of the things I'm doing is riffing on food from the early 1980s. I'm making embarrassing things like freaking embarrassing things, cringy things that people, older chefs than me, would be embarrassed by. But I'm doing things like bangers and that, sausages, mash, and onion gravy. Apricot chicken. I'm making sweet potato soup. I'm digging out cookbooks from, let's have a look, shall we? Sorry about turning the head, but let's just pull out the latest current pie. Here we go. Early 1980s. Somewhere around here, I have my collection of women's weeklies. No, I don't. They're currently at work in my office. Okay, I have about 30 old 1980s women's weeklies. And they're what I'm currently using for inspiration. That's what I'm selling to people. I'm selling people trip from 40 years ago. And it appears to be working. But that's what you sell people. You find an angle. It's not necessarily something I love. It's like, I make a lot of things like barbecue sauces, a lot of stuff that I learnt in America that I learnt in the South that I don't particularly care about. I do them well, people are extremely happy about it, but it doesn't light a fire in my soul. Once again, I'm a tradesman. What I'm doing is practicing my trade. If people want to buy a goddamn chair from me, much like a cabinet maker, I'll make a goddamn chair. May not necessarily want to make a chair, but I will because that's my job. And yeah, that's what you sell people. You find out what they want to buy. You find out that fantasy of going to a French restaurant is a holiday to France without having to spend the money. That's why people get upset about inauthentic food. And that's another reason why, when you look at things like Chinese or Indian or strong ethnic or Nepalese restaurants, like strong ethnic food, is always tilted towards the aspirations and fantasies of the country in which they find themselves in. Now, it's very hard to find authentic food from a country like China, like India, like Nepal, just pick any country that isn't Europe, because Europe's just a cesspit. And also, their stuff is very vigorously defined, so it's really easy. People know exactly what they're going to get, and then you go to France and they do exactly that. That has something to do with writing cookbooks in 300 years ago, so everything's standardized. It's much like controlling language by having the government print dictionaries. Anyway, and so what happens is a lot of people have fantasies that are sold to them about food, and so the fantasies are catered for. And that's what you do. That's what a chef is. That's what a chef does. It's a cheap restaurant, cheap trip to a place that would be expensive to go to. In this case, even with my background, even with my training, even with my experience, I'm selling people going to a pub in 1980. Kind of because that's the only niche I can fill at the moment, given the current location of my pub and where everything is. That's all I can do is sell people, and it's not even an authentic version of the 1980s. The other thing is, it's a fantasy. It's the fantasy version. It is not filled with nostalgia, first date that led to marriage level perfection. Now, if we're 100% honest with ourselves, everyone's first date sucks. You're nervous as all hell. You go see a movie that neither of you really wants to see, because what if you love the movie and you hate them? You don't want to have your favourite movie associated with someone you hate. But trust me on that, you don't want to do that. But if the relationship is successful and you're together for years, you'll talk about it and you'll build a fantasy about how it was the perfect date. Or if the relationship fails, you'll build it the other way and talk about how terrible it was. That's what people do. People build fantasies, and as a chef, that's what you're meant to sell. A lot of people don't think it's that. They think it's, I can do a really good roast duck, so I'm going to sell roast duck. And that's what I'm going to sell people. I'm going to sell people roast duck, and they wonder why nobody wants to buy it. Nobody wants to buy roast duck. They want a goddamn fantasy. That's why every goddamn cookbook you read opens, and every recipe you see online opens with this two-thirds of the information is just this fantasy spiel about this is what this recipe means to me, this is what cooking means to me, this is what we're doing. And it's to tell people the fantasy they're buying. That's why every single recipe you see on food.com is from someone's grandmother. You know, like I don't. Man, I remember how good my grandmother cooked. It was terrible. My grandmother was a terrible, terrible cook. Every woman of her generation was a terrible cook. And this is not to be mean to her. It's she never seasoned her food because she grew up in a time in which money was extremely tight. She was a child of the Great Depression, or rather the years just after the Great Depression. She was born in 33, so her significant moments would have happened during rationing in the Second World War, which is also rationing in the Second World War. Also, her experiences of being a teenager was growing up and joining the Women's Land Army, like a lot of people of women of her generation. She had to not learn a hell of a lot of cooking, just enough to keep yourself fed. And then what happened was a whole bunch of dudes came back from overseas who had army food, and that's what they freaking knew and loved. And so it was either salted or over seasoned or under seasoned. There is no middle ground with army food. It's either it's fucking cooked in the goddamn ocean, or it's cooked by someone that would faint if a single grain of salt was to be wafted through the room. There's no in between, and so these people had just no desire or training to cook professionally. That's why cookbooks start becoming a huge thing in the 1960s. In fact, one of the things I've got here is, and I'll just bring this over so you can all see it. This is actually the type of cookbook that I love to get hold of. These things are really hard to get. Let me drop everything on the ground. These guys. Now, what you're looking at here is a relatively famous, called the Institut de Cordon Bleu, the Blue Ribbon Culinary Institute in Paris. Literally publishing a weekly course in this little splat book. I've actually got the full course of this. I also used to have the American full course, and these are just like, this is just literally just telling you how to cook stuff. Really simple stuff. None of it's complicated. But this is what a husband wanted his wife to cook in the 1960s. So they had to buy the course because their mothers couldn't teach them how to cook. Their mothers didn't know how to cook. And even this is massively in aspiration. There's no way even a stay-at-home wife would be able to make most of the stuff in